Welcome to American Medieval, a podcast about the fact that if the United States has never been truly modern, it's probably because we've always been a little bit medieval. I'm your host, Professor Matthew Gabriel, and I've been researching, teaching, and talking about the Middle Ages, well, to anyone who will listen at least, for more than 3 decades. Each week on the show, we'll be joined by an expert scholar who'll share their fascination with, and sometimes their revulsion by, both the medieval world itself as well as the ways the historical period has been remembered and used right here in the USA. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of American Medieval. I'm Professor Matthew Gabriel, as I'm sure you know by now, and I am excited to be joined by two of the several hosts of the Multicultural Middle Ages podcast. We have Reed O'Mara, who is a PhD candidate in the Joint Art History program between Case Western Reserve University and the Cleveland Museum of Art, and is currently serving as a Samuel H. Kress Institutional Fellow at a German place that I'm not going to try to pronounce because I'm going to embarrass myself, but it's in Munich. And also Loren Cantrell, who is also a producer of the Multicultural Middle Ages podcast, but actually just as we were recording last week, defended her dissertation, is now a Dr. Cantrell.
Woo!
She got her PhD in French at the University of Virginia. So welcome, Reed and Loren.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks for having us. We're excited to be here.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I am very excited, Dr. Cantrell, for being here. I will use that every time.
I have to get like a monocle now.
You should, absolutely so. And, unfortunately, as is the joke for every PhD student, we're not like Finland, like we're not going to give you a sword or anything like that. But, the monocle works.
Great.
So that'll really
that.
kind of cement your status, And you did go to UVA too. I have to say that as a Virginia Tech professor as well. So the monocle will add something to the UVA-ness of your degree.
Perfect.
So anyway, I'm really excited to talk about kind of podcasting and, kind of your experience and kind of what you guys were doing. But as you know, and as our listeners know, like we like to start off with a silly question. And so if you'll indulge us, I'll ask the question to both of you, and then you guys can pick who wants to answer it first. So in this scenario, we have a time machine, right? In fact, we have 2 time machines because I have 2 guests, but they're single use, there and back, so you don't have to stay anywhere, there and back. But the provision is that this time machine has to go to a childhood version of yourself. And you have to explain to some childhood version of yourself, to young Reed or young Loren, that you will grow up someday to be enamored of, to professionally study the Middle Ages. How does young Reed, how does young Loren react to that news?
If I could start, I've been listening back to some of your episodes of this podcast, so I was excited for this question. And I hope you're keeping track of people's responses in sort of data collecting sense, because I feel like I noticed there's like top 3 answers, and one of them being like,
100%.
From the cradle, medievalist from birth, we've seen all the, kid medieval stuff. And then another answer that really stood out was a lot of people seem to want to be paleontologists. That was another one.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third answer that I thought was so relatable for me, because I think this is the camp I land in, is there were a bunch of people who wanted to go into studying space, and I was in that camp as well. But I think even there's a bit of like a generational gap, perhaps, where previous guests were inspired by Carl Sagan, and I love Carl Sagan, but I wanted to be Neil deGrasse Tyson. So that's what I was hoping for.
Okay.
But then I took physics and changed my mind. So that's
As one does.
Yes. Confronted the reality of, what is actually involved.
Yeah.
So, okay. All right. Was there something specific about kind of space that, like, my son was very into, when he was younger, like the planets, like specifically just learning all the facts about kind of the planets. But for other people, it could be kind of interstellar travel or kind of the space program or something like that. Was there something that kind of brought you to it, or even just kind of like, the vastness of the sky, like the stars at night or something like that?
I think it's like the grandeur of just everything being encompassed in the universe. I mean, I guess now we're thinking about multiverses and everything, but it was this sort of like grand scale, but then also the deep time sense of everything. I have no interest in traveling to space personally, but I think young me wouldn't be too surprised to find out that I was, interested in the Middle Ages, because I just kind of had this general curiosity for all things. And I think studying space, technically you're studying all things. So I think that was part of the inspiration there. But then, the more I studied, the more I fell in love with literature and languages. And it wasn't really until later in my university career that I fell into the Middle Ages, very happily so. Mm-hmm. And if it weren't for finding a good little home in the Middle Ages, I probably would have just kept falling farther and farther backward in time. But this is where I've landed for now.
That seems to be another kind of thread as well of the people. And I have the benefit of having recorded things and heard things that you guys have not heard because they haven't been released yet. But a lot of people who start or were pulled towards classics too, and so there was some sort of division, in which, do I go kind of further back in time or do I stay in the Middle Ages, or do I start in classics and kind of get pulled forward in time? But there's something about kind of the pull of the pre-modern, another world, if you will, to continue the space metaphor. So, but I would love to talk more about space because I have some space stories of my own that I could share. But Reed, what about you? How would young Reed react to this news?
Oh, she would have been thrilled, I think, because she probably would have gone, you mean like Indiana Jones?
Yeah.
'Cause I loved Indiana Jones growing up. And I even had the hat. I had a whip for a day, but then my parents realized not a good idea. But I had the hat, and I used to love being like, it belongs in a museum. So the fact that I ended up an art historian and a medievalist, no less, I think makes sense. I think also I was probably doomed to become a medievalist from the beginning because without even realizing it, my entire childhood was surrounded by the aesthetics of the Middle Ages because my mom actually... she was a huge fan of high fantasy and, things like Highlander are what I grew up on. But then she also, our house, I have come to realize maybe was a little different than other houses in that my mom collected gargoyles and we might have had a tapestry. Which you can imagine. And so, growing up in Alabama too, having giant gargoyles on your house went about as well as you could think. But in retrospect, I've realized that, I was totally going to become a medievalist, from the beginning.
Wow. Okay. So kind of castle core before castle core, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay. So was it the fantasy pull, do you think, that kind of brought your mother? And did you share in that? Did you read kind of that stuff? Grow up reading, not necessarily Tolkien, but, some of the other stuff?
I did read Tolkien, though. I was a big Lord of the Rings fan growing up, and I was a huge reader. So I read a lot. And I think I really did read a lot of fantasy, but I don't know. I think I really just was pulled to the idea of stone architecture and the actual aesthetics of it in movies and things. I found it really compelling, as much as the stories as well. But I don't know. It wasn't until I was in college that I had a professor who was a medievalist, shocker, Rosma Lazda at University of Alabama, who kept seeing me go into, architectural spaces that were medieval or in part medieval. And she just grabbed me one day and was like, you can just study this. And I was like, you can? So I feel like I was on a long journey of just enjoying architecture and, being a nerdy kid who would read books about it.
And so two things real quick is that one, it's kind of amazing that if you did actually run around saying it belongs in a museum, you were actually talking about yourself. So this was, as a budding art historian, right? So you just didn't realize, you were there, but you just didn't realize kind of you were there in that way. The other thing too is that another thread is from answering this question is how incredibly common it is for all of the guests and for myself as well, as I've talked about on previous episodes, is to have one kind of formative experience with a teacher who just really changes the way that you think about kind of what you want to do with your life. And it's often kind of what you were saying is like being pulled aside or just having a one-on-one conversation with somebody who says you're kind of good at this. You seem interested. It's why don't you try to explore this a little bit? And it's just opening your eyes too. I didn't know that I could be a medievalist. Is that a thing you could do? So that's kind of amazing.
It really is. And the stars aligned because my university at the time had just hired a medievalist. And so everything worked out and they were developing, more of a German medieval program, which is what I was in undergrad. But she ended up being so prophetic because this moment with this professor actually took place in Munich. And I now live in Munich. So it's almost like she knew this was the place where I would end up, eventually studying medieval manuscripts, not architecture so much, but, she somehow knew this was the place.
So we're talking about kind of a time slip here, right?
Exactly.
You were walking around prophesizing your future, having experiences that you will replicate someday later on. Loren, maybe you need to kind of step in, I know you were interested in astronomy, but maybe we should talk about astrology or something like that, right? right? About how
Yeah.
stars are kind
The
of aligning
crossover.
here. Yeah, exactly. Like this is the big kind of MCU multiverse converging here in the medieval world. You know, it all centers on Reed. Reed, you're the key to medieval's future. Like, so
Oh, my.
no pressure, but you know.
If you would ask people what, like the common question, what superpower do you wish you had?
Yeah.
My answer is always, I wish I could produce doppelgangers of myself that I could like bring back together or separate at will. And then I could study all the things. That was what I always wanted to be able to do, was to just do everything and just kind of be my own personal multiverse.
Yeah.
That's a brilliant answer, actually.
It's what I've always wanted. I don't think we can achieve it with current science, but we'll see.
I mean, they cloned Dolly a long time ago, so, you know, but then that runs into all sorts of issues about, you know, ethics and blah, 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 blah. So, yeah. But I'm sure our computer scientists are on this problem. They're really thinking this through really hard. So they're going to sort this out. That's the one thing that tech bros have going for them, is thinking about ethics.
Oh, yeah. And they solve all of our problems.
Yeah,
For sure.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Forward
Not a
thinking.
problem. Forward thinking. That's right.
Anticipating.
I want to say Reed is a really good follow on Instagram, by the way, because all of her current travels especially, but you're constantly in museums, constantly taking the best shots of the best things in every collection. And so I'm fully living vicariously through Reed's experiences in Germany right now.
Oh, no. Well, thanks. The last 10 days have been kind of wild because I went to so many cities just because I needed to go over to West Germany, and I was like, I need to spend more, like, while I'm there, I'm just going to hit up every single medieval museum I can find. And my camera roll is very full right now. So there's a long backlog of sculptures and manuscripts to post.
It turns out there are a few medieval museums in Germany, aren't there?
Yeah, and it turns out that, you know, with the magic of the Deutschland ticket, you can for free go to pretty much any medieval village or town that, yeah, for some reason still has, you know, huge treasuries, and that you can just go see them. So that's what I do on Sundays. I go with a friend of mine who is a modernist architecture historian, but she and I, on Sundays, we pick a town on a map, we go, and we have cake, and then we go check out a church or a local museum, and then we go back to Munich.
Oh, another delight. I mean, like you're mentioning like so many delights here, like A, museums, like B, public transit, like amazing,
Yeah.
Cake.
wonderful.
It's a privilege.
And then Kuchen, right? Like, come
Yeah.
on, baby. Like,
Yeah.
what more do you want? What a great Sunday.
You go into a bakery and it says, you know, Oma's Apfelkuchen. It's gonna be good.
Yeah, it is.
You know.
So I will say that this is a debate I have with European friends as well, especially people who live in England, colleagues and friends who live in England, is bakery culture, you know, and leaving aside the continent, which is, I think, another conversation that English-speaking people don't want to have about bakeries, is that Europeans get cakes better than Americans do. They don't understand pies, and there is a great
So
value
true.
in pies, and Americans have that kind of cornered. But cakes in Europe, this is a food podcast now, so
Yeah.
let's just talk about food more.
I'm now thinking like, oh, I gotta go get a Kopfen later, which is like this Munich. I think it's a Munich thing, or maybe it's a Bavarian thing. That's like a donut filled with vanilla cream, and it's so good.
Mhm.
Yeah, I used to not be a sweets person, and then I moved to Europe, and I was like, oh, I just wasn't an American
There you
sweets
go.
person. It turns out I just love European cake.
It's just different. So, and Loren, so your PhD, so continuing on kind of the travel thing, right? Like, so your work is in French primarily. Like, have you done kind of European travel as
yeah.
well, like as part of your research?
Speaking of bakeries and all that sort of thing, I had the good fortune of doing a fellowship year in Paris. And I was kind of like, which was really, well, so the program I was in, UVA has this exchange with the École Normale Supérieure in Paris. And what that entails is that you stay in the dorms as well. So it was a little weird because I turned 30 in a dorm surrounded by 18-year-old Europeans who were kind of horrified to find out that
birthday.
Thank you. They were a bit horrified to find out that my age started with a 3. But apart from that, they were lovely. And so it was really nice to be surrounded by people studying all sorts of different things. And there were other doctoral students there on exchange. And like Reed, I was like hopping around on trains and going to all sorts of places like Chartres and all these sorts of other things. And so that's really what I miss a lot. I'd love to get back over there. I mean, you talking about going to different medieval museums every Sunday. I was at the BNF like as much as I could get there.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
One of my favorite things was, the dream is to become like a regular, at like a bakery or something like that. And I found I was going to the BNF so often that finally the people at the front desk were like, "Ah, oui, Madame Lee, like, hello, we have your," and I was like, "Yes, they know who I am."
Oh,
so that
that's
was just
nice.
It's happening.
thrilling. It's happening. They know who I am. They have my spot. Like,
That's even better than a bakery, honestly, because they have the manuscripts.
oh, it's right. I mean, and big ups to them too, because for many reasons, but I was really terrified to go at first as a graduate student because, you hear about all sorts of intimidating reading rooms and going into different spaces and
especially French archivists.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the reputation, of course. And so I was really prepared to be told that, like, the BNF is basically a prison that you have to break into. But I had the opposite experience. Absolutely. I mean, they were welcoming. I don't know if this has like been a culture shift since my mentors were there last and who were, telling me to fear the BNF. But I found nothing but like welcoming, lovely people who really helped me do the best work. So anyone who's afraid of like going into a reading room, any graduate students in particular, I think just, follow the procedure, look at the instructions ahead of time, be prepared, have all your documents, preferably speak the language. But even if you don't, you actually, I can get by pretty well as long as you're just making sure that you're not stomping in on someone else's territory. I once also got to go visit a manuscript in Florence, and I do not speak Italian. I understand some Italian, but I kind of like showed up and I even had trouble finding the front door to get into the library. And I just was asking any passersby, like, please, I'm looking for manuscritti or whatever it was supposed to say. But I'm like, biblioteca. And finally, I think I ran into two different people who just kept telling me to go, you go right, and you go right, and you go right. And so I just was circling this building. But eventually I got in there and they were just as kind as in any other reading room I went to. So long rambling thing to say that anyone who can possibly get over there, please do. And you'll be welcomed when you do go. So I miss it. And I miss cake.
Yes. I mean, that's an absolute delight is being able to, there's not a employment in medieval studies generally, right? In academia, not an assured thing, not great, getting worse, all those things. But if you do manage to, spend some time doing the work and spending time in European archives, like being able to step out and go to a cafe and sometimes with a colleague and just enjoy, like you said, like a piece of cake, cup of coffee, cup of tea, something like that is just incredibly delightful. And my experiences have been the same. Like I haven't done a ton of archival work, but like everybody's very happy to have you there.
Mm-hmm.
My experience has mostly been, as yours, Loren, kind of in French archives at the Bibliothèque Mazarin in Paris, and then at the BNF as well. They were lovely, but there's also kind of you have to suffer a little bit.
Oh, a little, for sure.
We're going to make you suffer a little bit. But part of it is just like, is my French is not great. I mean, it's okay, but it's not great. It's just listening to me talk. And then I once had an archivist when I was trying to explain kind of why I need to see a specific manuscript. And why the microfilm, this is how old I am, it wasn't digitized, like a microfilm wouldn't work because I wanted to see the stitching and stuff like that. So I learned all these kind of technical terms in French I was studying, like with my dictionary and stuff like that. And the archivist just kind of leaned back. He was a younger guy. I think he was younger than me at the time. He leaned back and he said in English, "Stop. You have said enough French for today. I will give you the manuscript."
Oh, no.
That's like a lose-win. That's a bit of both.
Exactly, yeah. But I got
You
the
win some, you lose
manuscript, and like
some.
he got a story he will share for forever.
Right.
It's like this schmuck from America, like his bad French, like he was talking about foliation in French. Like you can't believe it.
You know what's so goofy? I had a kind of a funny, opposite of this interaction, but, language related still in the reading room. I also visited some manuscripts at the Château de Chantilly, just north of Paris. And I was going into the reading room and, I'm like speaking them in French and everything. And they ushered me into the reading room and it was gorgeous, by the way. It was almost like you were in like a secret room of somebody's hunting lodge with a beautiful view of a pond. It was awesome. But so there was one other reader in there at the same time with me, and she was also an American, but I didn't realize because, we were both speaking to each other in French and well enough that, neither of us, I guess, assumed where the other was from. And the man in charge of the reading room, he comes to both of us and he's like, "Oh, you silly Americans. You're both American. You're speaking to each other in French. Why are you doing this?" And we were like,
That's great.
and we were both like, "Oh, I don't know. We're in your territory, so we want to, speak your language, of course." And then he told us that he said, this was this guy's experience. He said that he loves having Americans in his reading room because we're nervous about offending them linguistically, I guess. And so we make a really true effort to speak French, even if we don't have good French. And but he was saying, and I'm quoting this guy, this is not my opinion, but massive generalization. He said he can't stand to have British people in his reading room because they do not even care to try. They're like, I'm from England. I don't care about you French people. I'm not going to speak French. I'm British. Let's not pretend. And so that's what he was saying. He loves having Americans because he found us a little silly for doing that, I guess, because his English was perfectly fine too. But yeah, I don't know. That was my experience as well. So I just really appreciated that. But have you ever run into somebody else in a reading room too in such a fortunate way? Because I found that's one of the great things about running into the reading room too, is not just the material you get to see, but the people that you kind of randomly bump into, because we will inevitably see our colleagues in these spaces if we go often enough.
Oh, I have a good one for
that.
Oh,
go. Yeah.
Please. Yeah.
I was at the British Library and I was staying with a friend of mine who's in my PhD program who was on a fellowship there, Sam Truman, and she came to the reading room and, was just sitting near me, but was looking over what I was looking at, and it was really nice. But then a really good friend of mine who also works on Hebrew illuminated manuscripts, Laura Feigen, came in and she was there and I was like, hey, and she was like, what do you have? And I was like, the Golden Haggadah, and which is this very famous, very luxurious, beautiful Sephardic illuminated manuscript. And so she was able to sit with me and we were both like, and look at this, and look at this. And it just was really special, because how often do you get to look at the Golden Haggadah, but also have a dear friend who's also a specialist in the same thing be with you? So that was really, really special.
That's fantastic. The serendipity of these larger reading rooms, because my story, and I think everybody probably has one, right, is also at the British Library. And if you've been to the British Library, like the Newark British Library, the reading rooms are kind of big, right? There's lots of places to sit. So you could very easily be in there with somebody you know pretty well and not see them. That would be a very easy thing to happen. But my story is, so when I was working on my dissertation, I did my PhD at Berkeley, but we moved to London, not related to my research, but it worked out for me. It was my wife's work. Doesn't really matter. But my second or third week there, I finally got a reading card so I could go into the British Library. I was sitting down. I don't think it was in the manuscript room. I think it was in kind of the modern room because I was just doing some reading on kind of modern scholarship. Anyway, I sit down, open up my backpack, pull out, I don't have my backpack because you can't bring your backpack in there, but I pull out my little baggie of books and I put them kind of on my table and I look next to me, I just kind of glance as I'm going down to pull things out. And the guy sitting right next to me has all these books on 11th century monastic culture, on the Peace of God and kind of monasteries and stuff like that. And I was just like, oh, hey, are you a medievalist? Mm-hmm. And we went and got coffee and stuff like that. And he was also finishing his dissertation at King's, and London became a very good friend and introduced me to kind of all the medievalists in London at the same time. And that's really it wasn't anybody I ever knew, but this is the person I try to stay in touch with now and stuff like that. Yeah. But the community that's built in these scholarly moments is really amazing. And it's not just, and this is called a transition, right? It's not just kind of in physical spaces, but it can be on online spaces too. In old Twitter before it became terrible and awful, right? Horrible, right? But even on places like Bluesky or things like podcasts, right? Is that I've made connections in that way, which have enriched me as a person, kind of personally, but also just my scholarship, working on kind of conference presentations or papers or panels or, edited collections or articles or something like that, just because Loren, you were saying about making a doppelganger, we're fortunate when you have a very good scholarly community is there are other people who are doing that work and they want to share it with you, right? And that's kind of the real excitement about that. So this is a very kind of awkward, long-winded way of transitioning to your guys' podcast, the Multicultural Middle Ages, which is, a collaboration because there's not just you guys, there's a couple other people involved as well. So could you tell us just a little bit about the podcast, how it got started, what brought you specifically together and, with your collaborators to launch this?
Yeah, so we're the two women of the podcast. And I think it's amazing that we both have bangs and glasses and I don't know.
It's the uniform. It's the scholarly uniform.
It's our uniform. But we also are joined by Jonathan Correa-Reyes, Logan Quigley, and Will Beatty, just to give them a shout out. But the podcast began when I had joined the Graduate Student Committee of the Medieval Academy of America, and at the time, Logan was on the committee as well, and John was the chair, and I think it was in our first meeting that I had joined, and obviously there were other people on the committee as well, but John was saying, like, I was thinking about it, and maybe we could do a podcast, and Logan and I were like, yeah, why not? That sounds great. And then we spent some time thinking about it. And then miraculously, it actually came to fruition. And I guess that was like 5-6 years ago.
That long?
Crazy.
Yeah.
It must have been, right? Because we're going into our 5th season and we started before.
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. But then over time, as more committee members left the graduate student committee and then new ones joined, with every new turn, we're asking people like, oh, do you want to join the podcast? Is anyone interested? And that's how we were joined with Will. And then most recently, and quite luckily, with Loren.
I was really excited to be approached by it too. So I'm the latest, recruit to join, but all of us at some point or another in the past few years have cycled through the graduate student committee of the MAA.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you were talking just a minute ago about finding communities virtually. That was what I was really looking for in joining the graduate student committee. I mean, the MAA largely does this as well, but particularly for graduate students. And I like to point out that graduate students make up almost a quarter of the membership of the Medieval Academy.
Mm-hmm.
So really representing graduate students in that way on the committee and trying to serve our interests felt so valuable, but it was also just a great way to make more connections. There's medievalists, of course, at my own university at UVA, but for plenty of graduate students, they might be at universities where they're the only medievalist, or maybe there's one professor who's a medievalist there. And that isolation is real. And it can be so hard to get acquainted with all of the skills that are asked of us as medievalists, but also all of the, spaces and resources that, are required to be kind of like get this training as medievalists. So the graduate student committee really seeks to fulfill that. And then out of that, like Reed was saying, the podcast was kind of naturally born out of that effort because so much of what the graduate student committee does is virtual. And in our podcast, what we really try to do is platform the voices of others. So the format basically is that people submit episode proposals to us and we kind of vet through those and we try to put out as many as we can. We're our own production company and we're all pretty amateurs at doing this, but we do what we can to get out as many of the voices that are sent to us as we possibly can. And it's really resulted in, I think, we can't claim to be fully representative of all the research going on right now, but I think we do a pretty good job of representing all the different sort of like methods and topics that are encompassed in medieval studies and the global medieval studies. I think I'm rambling a bit now on this, but that's what we seek to do. That's basically our mission, is that we're trying to really spotlight all of the great like diversity of research and methods that are out there. And I'm excited for our next season because I think we're really doing that greater than we have in any previous season. We're going to be putting out more episodes than we ever have before. And we have like a huge wide range of topics. We get medievals from all over the world submitting episodes. And so it's just been exciting to build that virtual network.
Yeah, and I think that's really fantastic too, because like you said, I mean, like being a graduate student generally is alienating, right? Like it's a lonely process because although you're working with an advisor, you might have like other people in your cohort or something like that. Like at the end of the day, like you're writing kind of, and you feel the pressure of your project like on your shoulders, like ultimately. And so being able to connect, I think, is incredibly important. The other thing too, which I really loved about what both of you guys said, is highlighting the different disciplines that are kind of underneath the umbrella of medieval studies, because I think that, especially for people looking from the outside, they tend to think of, maybe English departments or history departments, if they think a little bit more like Reed, like maybe towards art history or something like that. But it's not just those things. And even within that, like lots of different kind of approaches. So, have you found, with the podcast or just kind of generally with the graduate student committee, that you've been able to bring those different disciplines into conversation, like kind of effectively, or have there been like kind of points of friction between the disciplines or anything like that?
That's a really good question. I think that in some of the episodes, we've had people diving exactly into the question of, disciplines and how they're split off. In one of the episodes where we talked about the Black Death, that was part of our collaboration with the Journal of Medieval Studies Speculum, which is published by the Medieval Academy. We had scholars on there talking about how Some of them do more science, based research into the DNA of skeletons and finds, and how their research can be separated from, say, the history of the Black Death, but that these things all need to be quite integrated. So we've had episodes where people do engage with that. But I think also just across a season, when you can bring together an episode on medieval trans studies, at the same time you have an episode on medieval Japanese Buddhism, or a musicologist who does
Bohemian frescoes.
Yeah,
I was just thinking of one of your
frescoes.
episodes.
Or musicologists talking about chant and doing performance practice today, in the 21st century and what that means. I mean, I think that's really nice for at least like the listeners, just if they follow along for a whole season, which I hope they do, that they can see like, oh yeah, and now there's something completely different. Could be the open of every episode, which I think is fun.
And in terms of like diversity of methods as well. So in this next season, we're expecting to have 2 different episodes that are centered on disability studies. And one of them, if I remember correctly from the proposal, is more of a historical study of disability in the sagas. But then another episode will be a conversation across scholars who are talking about a more personal experience with disability and how that shapes their practice as medievalists as well. So I'm looking forward to hearing that conversation. And we also have episodes that feature digital humanities studies. We have an episode coming up this season getting into prosopography. We have another episode getting into using large studies of data to kind of retrace female scribes across large bodies of work. So I think the diversity there, like the word, diversity, like we kind of try to demonstrate that in many different ways. Our podcast is called The Multicultural Middle Ages, but I think it's not just focused on the cultural question. It's also focused on, like Reed was saying, this interdisciplinarity and interchange of methods as well. And I think also worth highlighting, I'm really proud of the way that we tend to mix together people at different stages in their career as well.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. So we have we call them speculum spotlights, where we do a collaboration with the journal Speculum. And those tend to be more senior scholars who are talking about work that they have published in Speculum. But then we'll also have episodes, and I think we have one coming up this season, from even people completing their undergraduate degrees who are enthusiastic about a topic.
Oh, that's great.
And they just want to spotlight that topic and, get people excited about it as they are. So I think we do a pretty good job of demonstrating medieval work at various stages of people's career, either more public humanities type work or the much more formal, like rigid academia type work, but also conversations and senior scholars, early career scholars. I think we're doing like a massive pitch now for our podcast. Anyone who wants to submit an episode, please do.
Yeah, I feel like the greatest I don't mean this to sound like, oh, yes, and we're doing perfect. But
yeah, no.
I think a really good sign of a healthy podcast is that every season we've had more submissions than the previous one. So it makes me feel like, okay, we do have an audience. We do have people who are, seeing our call for proposals and are feeling emboldened, like that they can submit something. Because it is for, anyone can submit something, and we will consider every proposal seriously. Whether it's discussing medievalism or a very niche topic about, 1306, or something like that. Like, we will consider everything seriously, whether you are on the early path of your, academic journey or are outside of it, or, whatever. If you can, like, we've had directors or a screenwriter as well, If you engage with the Middle Ages in a thoughtful way, we're happy to platform you.
We try to, process as many of these episodes as we can and support as many voices as we can. And part of how we're able to do that is because we're such a big team. So like we said, there's Reed, myself, there's Logan, John, Will. And because of that, each of us comes in from a slightly different discipline. So, Reed's our art history guru. I'm, more in French literatures and languages, specializing in hagiography. John's coming in from English. Will is doing like apocalyptic studies. I think each of us kind of brings in just enough of an awareness of like different corners of medieval studies to be able to help bring these voices forward to the public. But like Reed was starting to say, we definitely don't do it perfectly. And I think I wish we had greater expertise in more far-reaching disciplines that we're trying to encompass in the umbrella of medieval studies. So that's something we're always trying to do more, is bring in episodes from people who are far outside of our own expertise. And I think we do that by having a diversity of formats. People can submit single author works, conversations within their own disciplines. So that's something we're always kind of grappling with, is trying to make sure that we're not just, if it were my podcast, I would just be platforming awesome French research or something like that. But so we try to get beyond our own biases and bring in more people if we can.
I think what we lack in certain expertise, we at least make up for with avid curiosity.
Yeah.
And a desire to learn more.
That's what being a scholar is,
Absolutely.
right? Like, I mean, that's exactly it, is just being curious, like just being kind of capacious in your understanding of kind of what is a good question, and not being the kind of person, and there's plenty of dudes who, let's be frank, kind of, I know this is an audio podcast, but let's be frank, look like me, who have podcasts, who will just be like, well, I'm just kind of the expert on everything. And so I'm just going to kind of pronounce. But I think the more interesting ones to me, and the more interesting ways of approaching any sort of topic, is just like, what are the questions that are raised? Tell me something, teach me something, like let me learn something and let me ask you questions, and then let's have a conversation. And that seems to be exactly kind of what you guys are doing, which is just so really wonderful with the episodes that you guys have produced, is again, like the kind of expansive understanding of kind of multicultural and diversity within that. Is you're talking about diversity of methods, you're talking about diversity of topics, you're talking about diversity of kind of ideas, like, and diversity of kind of the types of people that you're bringing on, and all of them are bringing their own approach to things, and that's how we understand things better.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, it's not just old white dudes, again, like me, just kind of saying like, oh, this is kind of what the Middle Ages are. So I think like that's what's really kind of exciting about it in so many ways, is just that you've assembled not just a great team, but the host of guests. And read, like, if you, like you're saying, like more people are listening and more people are submitting, like that's success, right?
It's exciting. I would say that Logan is really our like tech guy, and he always seems to know what's going on with our website and everything. But he always will, post the numbers, every now and then about listens in our group chat. And I'm always like, even if it was one, I'd be so excited. But the numbers are, somebody listened, and it maybe wasn't just my fiance or something, but it's nice when he posts the numbers and there are multiple zeros. It's kind of nice. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's also cool just to like going elsewhere, like going to a conference or something, and somebody's like, "Oh, hey, are you know the podcast?" And I don't know, that feels like a little like, but it is cool to know that there are other medievalists listening, and they're like, "I'm going to submit something." I mean, that's cool.
That's fantastic. Hi, everyone. I am delighted to let you know about a brand new podcast joining us in Multitude, Dreaming Against the Machine. As American medieval is about the past, Dreaming Against the Machine is about envisioning a realistic and hopeful future. Each week, journalist and astrophysicist Dr. Adam Becker will have an earnest and entertaining conversation with a guest about possible futures, seen through the lenses of history, science, and culture. In a world where tech oligarchs and their power fantasies seem everywhere, Dreaming Against the Machine aims to take back the public conversation about what our world can and should be. New episodes every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts.
Like we were saying before, it's a great way of building community even remotely, and I've definitely been feeling that. And in terms of like seeking broader audiences and listeners, it's not like we're trying to compete with like the top popular podcast or anything like that. I think it's, fair to say we're in our relatively contained world of medieval studies. But what I think is really nice too about the podcast is that I think in particular, I think of our Speculum Spotlight episodes as being a sort of bridge into the journal or a bridge into spaces that I think maybe some people might find or might anticipate to be exclusionary or anticipate to be, maybe too elite for them in some sense, which I have not found to be the case either. I mean, the team behind Speculum is incredible and supportive, and the team behind the MEA is incredible and supportive. But I know that there's this sort of perception of like, oh, I can't break into that space. So I feel like the podcast kind of serves as this nice bridge for people who, like grad students in particular, who might feel like, oh, I don't know if I can step into this space, step into our space, listen, submit an episode, and then approach us when you see us at conferences. And I think you're doing that too with the American Medieval. If we could just like do this little compliment loop back and forth, because
oh shucks, I never expected that.
Because I know your podcast is different in that the format format is you're the host interviewing people, but in the same sense, you're drawing from this vast network of people that you've been able to interact with over the course of your career. And in that, you've built on these connections, and you're able to bring in many different voices to talk in this really informal, accessible way. And so I see us as having shared missions in that sense.
Yeah, well, thank you. Like it is. Like I want to go back to something you were saying, kind of Reed, earlier. Is like I see numbers, and I'm like, wait, people are listening to this? Like, what's going on? Like, and I had that weird experience too, in which I had a guest on a couple of weeks ago, and we recorded, and it hasn't been released yet. But he was saying to a friend of his, and he was saying, oh, I'm going on this podcast, next week. And he's like, and the friend said to him, to this guest, he's like, oh, you're a medievalist, right? Like, there's this podcast you might like. It's called American Medieval.
No way.
And yeah, and so it was like a sighting in the wild of somebody actually listening to it.
Actually, that's amazing.
Yeah, and like you said, it's not just my mom, which my mom did say when I told her I was starting a podcast. She's like, "What's a podcast?
Oh,
how do I listen to a podcast?"
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's okay, Mom. We'll set you up. So
yeah.
If you're out there, Mom, like I hope you're listening, because otherwise I failed in explaining how to access the podcast.
To access a podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm just talking into the air. But I want to go back to something you were saying too, and like I appreciate the words, because I think that one of the things that certainly this podcast is trying to do, and I see again, like I absolutely agree. Like I see the Multicultural Middle Ages doing the same thing. Is just kind of like opening up the Middle Ages, because like the speculum spotlights, one of the things I've encountered when I talk to people about kind of research, especially people who are outside of academia, is they have no idea how to access it.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes they feel a little bit intimidated, but also it's just a logistical question. Like you and I, like as, scholars, like we learn eventually how to like where to find speculum online, University of Chicago Press, journals, blah, blah, blah. We know how to kind of find those things. They don't even know where to look.
Yeah.
And so even just but they know what a podcast is oftentimes. And so like being able to find that and say like, oh, this is how I kind of find that stuff. And if I wanted to read more, that's kind of amazing, right? Because like we need, especially given the state of medieval studies right now, like people are interested in this stuff. Like, and so
Definitely.
they need to build that interest, and anything that we can do, I think, to reach out and say like, hey, with all of our flaws, and there are plenty of flaws in medieval studies and in the study of the Middle Ages, but this can be a community in which you can participate if you want to.
Absolutely.
I think to that point, actually, I think this is completely correct and really great. I think it also, having a platform like a podcast also lets people realize that scholarship is by people. Like we're humans with, faults and solutions and ideas and things, but there are people behind the byline, as it were, and behind the titles. And this stuff isn't just so authoritative, actually. It is by people who, yes, have done a lot of research and are, constructing arguments and putting things together, but it is not without an author and without a voice and a person behind it. And I think especially with, AI and how that, is changing the conversation about like what is authorship and things, it's important to remind people that there are people, scholars on the ground, as it were, who are going into libraries, looking at manuscripts or going onto sites and looking at objects, and then they're putting their knowledge together in this format. And it's accessible because it's by people. Like you can reach people.
And you can learn it, right? Like none of us, like I don't want to speak for you guys, but like I didn't know shit like when I started this thing, right?
Amen.
Like I didn't know how to do any of this stuff. Like
You're telling me I'm in Hebrew manuscripts,
Like I didn't know anything. Like, and this is something too, like just to kind of complement what you were saying, Reed, is that my good friend and co-author David Perry has kind of talked a lot about, and he's certainly not the only person, of course, that's been talking about it, is that there's kind of a genre of science journalism which talks about the process by which kind of discoveries and advancements are made, but there isn't anything like that for humanities scholarship, in social science scholarship. So it just seems to kind of drop ex nihilo, like kind of out of the air when we realize like, Richard III did this thing, or, this castle was this place, or this cathedral was this, or anything like that. And so anything that we can do to, again, demystify, and I love the way that you said it, Reed, like there were people who did this, right? Like other people can learn how to do this stuff, but it's important to understand the process by which, and the rigor by which we actually kind of do this work, because it's not just kind of like pulling stuff out of your, behind, and then saying things, or putting it into ChatGPT or something like that, and spitting out nonsense. So
I was thinking the exact same thing about process in particular, and podcasts, and I think, some people do this through blogs and that sort of platform, but having this sort of space where you can talk about works in progress is so valuable. Because I think for outsiders, for members of the public, like you were just saying, or for people who are just getting started in this, anybody, it feels as if you just somehow from the cradle knew all of these old languages, and you knew how to read manuscripts, and you knew all of these things. And it's just not the case. And so I think the more that we can demystify, like you guys have already said, but the more you can demystify the process is so valuable. And in doing my own dissertation, I tried to prioritize demonstrating process throughout its development. So I just defended last week, but in the process of writing the dissertation, what I was really actively trying to do was publicly demonstrating exactly where I was at every stage, so that my peers, but also my mentors, could have like an exact sense of like where I was throughout the process. And I'm sure there's ways I could have done that better, but I think even like within our grad programs, that's something we could do better, is where does a dissertation come from? It's many different stages of process and many different stages of things that get cut and are wrong or then get added later. And so in every way, I think showing process is so valuable.
I mean, I think you're completely right. The showing the work, almost like a math proof, I think is really useful. And that's how you get people, to see where your argument is going, and like to be like, yes, this has validity. But I was also thinking about the power of also acknowledging what we do and do not know.
Oh, yeah.
One of the most wonderful things, I think, is when I have, family visiting or something, and we inevitably go to a bunch of museums with medieval art or churches and things, and I,
and then have cake.
And then have cake.
Yeah. Okay.
And I get to be the interlocutor and, explain sculptures and I find it is the most wonderful and exciting thing to see people make connections. And, I just had family here, and by the end of the trip, my partner's uncle was like, and that one's St. Christopher. You told me about him, and, was telling me stuff. And I think that's great.
Yeah.
But I also love it when they ask me questions, or I see something and I have to go, I actually am not sure about that. Like, I don't know which saint that is, or, let me think about it for a second. And then I'll, say, well, based on what I do know of the Middle Ages, blah, 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 blah. But I think it's also important for them to realize, like, I don't know sometimes. And that's like a fault with me, but it's also just like, there's a lot of things we don't know about the Middle Ages and about these buildings, or, these objects, or, texts, And so I think it's also really great when on a podcast forum or just in conversation, you can highlight when there are unknowns, and then it's completely fine that there are unknowns, and we'll figure it out or we won't. There's so many manuscripts that I work on where I know the name of the scribe, but that's where it ends. Like, I found nothing else on him or her, and sometimes I just have to say that, like, yep, his name was XYZ.
Yeah, I mean, demonstrating that kind of humility, which I think, is the best part of this type of humanities, social science research, right, is just to say at times, like, I don't know. Like, this is all we can know. Maybe somebody will find something else more, later on. They'll be in their manuscript, or they'll figure something else out. But like right now, this is the best we can say. And it's a good guess. It's an educated guess. It's there's a reason that we can say this happened in this way or at this time. But at the end of the day, like, I don't know. The other thing too, I just want to kind of, point out too, is like, that's excellent pedagogy and teaching, is when someone asks you a question and you don't know, is say like, I don't know.
Absolutely.
And then that can get you to the process thing too, is like, how would we find that out? Like, let's try to find that out. And you can either do it, like if you're in a classroom, for example, like you can try to work with them and try to figure it out. Or you can say like, let me go explore, and then I will come back to you and tell you how I found this out. Like, that is incredibly effective. And it, like, like Loren, like you were saying, like kind of demystifies the process by which we actually know things.
And it builds trust with your students as well.
And it builds trust.
Agreed.
Exactly.
It shows that you care about their question and that you care to follow up on that with them. It was always such a red flag to me whenever I would hear people talk about in their teaching how if a student asks a question you don't know, you kind of like, do you know? They kind of like
Yikes.
My eyes
antagonistically.
are
I know, exactly,
enormous
cringe.
right
You
now. Like, wow.
I know. I mean, am I the only one who's heard this before? So before coming into grad school, I was a high school teacher. And so like, I loved teaching so much and had a background in teaching before starting my graduate research. So I cared deeply about teaching. And I just came across so many people as I entered grad school who assumed teaching was being this sort of like infallible, perfect figure at the front of the room who could answer any question. And
Sage on a stage.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, and it's not generational either. I think that can be kind of the perception of people who maybe if you lack previous teaching experience as a new graduate student or anything. I too often heard, and I think it's a bit of a defense mechanism too, but I just found that so sad and frustrating if people, were afraid of demonstrating what they don't know and afraid of demonstrating that something's in progress. And so, yes, absolutely. I don't know. I almost wanted to just like jump up and down and high five you when you were saying that in your teaching, how it's so valuable.
There's a high five.
There we go. We did it.
Okay.
I wonder if we're almost like trained as scholars, like when we go to conferences and you get a question you don't know the answer, if we're like trained to perform an answer so much that it becomes ingrained where you don't want to like be like, I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. That might be a small thing. I think it's so dependent on each person. But yeah, there's a lot of power in being like, let's figure it out.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I think there are, we were talking about kind of building, we've been talking consistently kind of about building community, but like we need to acknowledge too that that's not always the case. Not everybody is in this, kind of in the profession of academia, generally medieval studies specifically, to kind of be a team player. And so sometimes, like you were saying, Reed, like questions at conferences are pointed. So it is natural sometimes to be defensive and see someone as kind of attacking you. It's not always intended that way. It's probably not even mostly intended that way, but sometimes it is. And so you can kind of be defensive. But that being said, it is good to be humble before the sources, before kind of what we understand, and to think about, what are the limits kind of our knowledge? Because the reality is like we know a lot about medieval Europe. We don't know everything. There's lots of just kind of like blank spaces. It might be even called a dark age, if you will. So,
yes.
I regret saying that immediately, but
the bright age is behind you on the screen.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, I mean, it's amazing, like, too, like, people think that, I don't know, like, everything's been uncovered, right? But, like, working on, Jewish art from the Middle Ages, caches are found, synagogues are found, like, things are still coming up out of the ground. So, manuscripts are coming out of collections and going on the market and things. So there's more and more to do. And I think that that's what's so exciting, too, about medieval studies is that if you think you've finished it, you have it. Like, there's so much more. There's always so much more. It's a bottomless time period. I mean, what else can you expect from like a 1,000-year window? But still.
That spans several continents and involves all sorts of
several continents.
It might be even called a multicultural kind of community in the Middle Ages. So lots of different peoples who did different things and looked different from one another and acted different and talked different and all sorts of things. Like, it's not the kind of caricature of the period that unfortunately we hear and see so often, and not just pop culture. So
it's all the church and they all speak Latin.
Right.
Yep.
They're all
It's all crusades.
No one's having sex. They're all so devout.
That's right.
So devout. It's amazing populations continued.
It is amazing how populations continued. So Loren, you kind of gave a kind of a hint of kind of what's coming next for this coming season. But like, is there anything else kind of planned for the podcast? Like, are you bringing in more people? Like what's the response within the community of the graduate students generally? Like, has it been kind of really exciting? Like, do you see it kind of continuing for many years forward, or?
Well, I do. I mean, anecdotally, when I was at last year's Kalamazoo, I feel like time is like passing quickly and slowly at the same time because, yes, last Kalamazoo would have been my last act as former chair of the graduate student committee. And we had this really great...
It feels like a million years ago.
Well, we had this really great social. We always have a graduate student social at the MAA, the ICMS, and we used to try to do it at Leeds, but it can be kind of hard. But we just had such a great turnout, and I feel like I mean, I think we had maybe 30 people in a basement talking about medieval studies in an excited, youthful way. And
it's funner than it sounds, 30 people in a basement talking about medieval studies.
Yeah,
so,
we popped off.
Okay,
I mean,
and there's probably was wine. Yeah.
It's the place to be. I would say it's the place to be. And throughout my conversations with people in that room, I was just buzzing around like, I don't know, like a chicken with her head cut off or something. And I was just encouraging as many people as I could to submit, and people were submitting. And so I just really, I felt so affirmed that the virtual community that we're building, we're seeing it take shape in real life spaces as well. So seeing my graduate student peers, together in person, and I love going to conferences for this reason, really puts a face to the name and encourages participating in these virtual communities that we try to build, because I do enjoy building these virtual communities, but I think they're most effective when you can bring them back to the ground. I guess that's kind of a rambly way of saying that, yes, I am sensing like a future of enthusiasm for our project, and I'm hearing people feeling more and more confident about participating. And we, the podcast team, are making more and more of an effort to accommodate that enthusiasm. Like Reed said, every season we get more episode proposals than we ever have in the previous season. And so in response to that, in this season, we're trying to put out, I mean, don't hold us to it, but we're trying to put out 2 episodes a month, which doesn't sound like that much because I know you're going for like 1 a week, which is incredible. But for us, considering that we have to like solicit all the proposals, like get all the audio together, we edit it ourselves and everything, and balance it, of course, with our teaching and our coursework and all that sort of stuff. It can be a lot, but it's really rewarding. And so I think we're going to have a really exciting season. Do you have something more to add to that, Reed? Does that ring with what your experience has been?
Totally agree with you. The only thing I would add is I think on the producer side of things, we all really enjoy our group chat and working together, I think. And yeah, I really look forward to continuing to work with the team. And so I think for us also as individuals, we're like, but we're just now getting good at editing. We can't possibly stop. And we finally have a system, because, obviously our editing has been perfectly flawless the whole time, but perhaps it's getting better. But also I think we enjoy working together, and I don't know, it's been a real treasure to get to know people outside of, my immediate field. And I don't know, yeah, it's been really great. So I look forward to continuing to working with the team. And I think that as much as the excitement we get from all the proposals pushes us forward and also helps us improve.
I love what you guys were saying. It seems so complimentary, is that the people who are working on this, not just, you and Loren and Reed, but, your other collaborators, is like you're getting energy from the response that you're getting. And I think that's the only way that's sustainable, is the enthusiasm that you can bring to this. Because as you were saying, like, this is work, like it's hard work. I wouldn't have been able to do this without kind of the people that I'm working with at Multitude, Julia Shafini, who's an amazing podcaster and also an amazing kind of editor that I work with directly, and then everybody else that I've been fortunate to encounter. Like, it brings me joy to do this kind of stuff and have these conversations, but let's be real, like, it's work. It's stuff to do. Like, it takes up time in your day, and it requires thought, and you have all these other things sometimes in the real life off of the internet that are going on that you need to deal with as well. So,
and yet I feel like it is totally work. It is so much effort, but it's really fun. Yeah. I actually love deleting and stuff. I think it's really it's the nitty gritty work that I actually really enjoy.
The meditation of mindless repetitive tasks.
1000%. But I think also one of the biggest tells about that, even though it's work, it's enjoyable work and work worth doing, is that every time we get submissions, the closest the producers get to fighting is being like, oh, but I kind of wanted to produce that one.
Yeah, we fight over who gets to be in charge of the episode. Yeah. Because that's something we do in our process too. We divvy them up.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Any of our contributors, if you are working with me or working with Loren or whoever, we fought for you to be your point person, as it were.
So whoever gets to be the producer, like, they won that slight battle. So everybody can see kind of the scales of how things are tipping in the multicultural Middle Ages podcast world, like, depending on who gets to the most of them. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we always start off the meetings being like, well, I'm really busy this fall, so I think I should only take 2.
But that one's mine.
I want it. You're like, well, I really I liked them all, so now I'll produce 5, or whatever. And you're like, true academics, we're like, yes, I'm very, very busy, but I can take more work.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes.
That's in the future.
It is work, of course, and it's not something we do for profit in any way. Like being part of the MA, it's nonprofit, so no one's getting paid to do this. We're just doing it for the love of the game. But that love of the game is so fulfilling. It doesn't heat my home or put food on my plate, but it does. It is so immediately satisfying in ways that sometimes producing traditional scholarship isn't as immediately satisfying. If you put out an article, say an article in Speculum, it could be well over a year before you see that thing come to print, and you wrote it even years prior. So the time scale of being able to do this sort of work more immediately is also really energizing in itself. And I think this energy we get from doing this sort of work, then we can channel into more long-term projects and things that are not as like immediately day-to-day satisfying. So it has that side benefit as well. It's like an energy drink.
It's like, all right. Doing the Middle Ages is like an energy drink.
Yeah.
So I think there's no better place to kind of maybe call it then, because we are kind of running out of time, unfortunately.
Yeah,
so Middle Ages, like an energy drink, build community, and go eat some cake. I mean, that's really the takeaway. Don't pay attention to anything else. Just go get some cake.
Stay warm, get a coffee.
And stay warm, get a coffee, get a cake. That'll be it. So, Loren and Reed, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. If people do want to find out more about you and the podcast, where might they be able to find out about it on the internet?
Our website, I actually have it pulled up, unsurprisingly, is multiculturalmiddleages.com. So if you just Google Multicultural Middle Ages, you will find us. We're also present on Bluesky, so you can find us in the same kind of way. Unfortunately, our abbreviation is MMA, so sometimes it looks like our podcast is some kind of fighting podcast, but it is the Multicultural Middle Ages, the MMA podcast. You can find us on Bluesky and our website.
And Instagram.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Instagram,
Everybody follow Reed on Instagram because she has pretty pictures of churches and museums and stuff like that. So I was going to say that's another thing that unites our podcast, perhaps, is American Medieval. If you Google it, the podcast is starting to show up, but mostly it's the American Medieval Fighting Association.
Oh, no.
Where the guys put on, armor and like bash each other and swords, like with swords. Yeah, so.
Wow, the desire to just
telling.
make a podcast about the Middle Ages and the intersection with fighting. I mean, I still feel like we need to have an episode about...
We would welcome an episode on medieval fighting.
Yeah, somebody do it.
Yeah.
There are sword manuals.
If there are any listeners out there, I mean, I'm sure there are. So contact the Multicultural Middle Ages and submit your episode description. Again, Reed and Loren, thank you so much. Everybody go listen to the Multicultural Middle Ages podcast as soon as possible, please, and get yourself a slice of cake. That'll be it for this episode of American Medieval, though. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and hopefully we'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of American Medieval, proud member of the Multitude Podcast Collective. I'm your host, Professor Matthew Gabriel, and this episode was edited by Julia Schiffini. The theme song to American Medieval is from the song Sleeping Bags by OTE. If you'd like to support the show, get ad-free episodes, be inscribed into the Book of Life for being a kind and generous soul, and get some other neat bonus stuff, please visit us at patreon.com/American Medieval. Thanks again for listening. See you all soon.